Edgware Road today, where again you see this rich variety of sherbets and coffee houses. So this is part of that ongoing interaction. The middle slide image is about Westminster School, still there today by Parliament Square. And in the 17th century, Arabic was taught there. It was part of the curriculum. And you may ask why. And the reason was that knowledge of Arabic was essential to translate the knowledge of the universities of Andalusia from Arabic to Latin so that it can be carried on at Oxford and Cambridge. And again, it's interesting, just like the Edgware Road connection, that Arabic is back again on the Westminster School curriculum, this time for trade links. And finally, there's the example, many of you are Londoners, and there are so many place names which bear the hints of cultural contact. Even landmarks like Trafalgar Square, the name is based on a geographical location named by the Muslim geographers of previous centuries. So the main point I want to try to make is that when we talk about British identity is not just a Judeo-Christian identity. It is an Islamo-Judeo-Christian identity. And this is something we must recognize. However, let's go on to the modern history of settlement. And I've tried to categorize it into 4 periods. And the first period was that of the migrant worker coming in perhaps for what he considered a temporary sojourn. Then there was another period in the mid-60s to the 70s where we had our first associations forming. But still then, I think, people had one eye looking back and one eye forward. And then there was the key period of the 80s to the early 90s when I think the Muslims raised their head above the parapet for the first time. And that was because the issue was so serious that they could no longer remain silent. They had to ask the question, who speaks for us? Who represents us? Can the crises going on in other parts of Europe happen to us here? So that's a critical period. And then finally, more recently, we have in the mid-1990s, where that old myth, the myth of return, was finally put to rest, both metaphorically and physically. And if we just go back to each of these stages, the stage of the migrant worker, I think there we pay tribute. I mean, they came here with hopes of the mother country of the Commonwealth, and they showed tremendous enterprise. The whole fabric of mosques, which we see across the country today, the foundation stone was laid by those people. They started with porter-cabin mosques, with mosques in homes, and it's from that base that we are where we are today, and we must remember that debt. And also, I think, even though many of them were not highly educated, didn't go business schools, they had that basic entrepreneurial flair, and they set up the halal meat industry. They were concerned. So it's interesting that it was religious concerns right from the outset, which are very important in the shaping of Muslims from India, Bangladesh, and other parts of the world. And I think what I've presented here are just as I said, it's a snapshot. They're just a few images. And behind each image, there's a history, there's lives of people who have sacrificed, there's a story to be told, and we hope one day these stories will be told. In the second period, from the mid-60s onwards, you see associations which still are around today, like the Federation of Student Islamic Societies, UK Islamic Mission, MSS, and in those days, I suppose it's true to say that those associations were very much concerned with politics back home. Though there were a few forward-looking steps being made by the Islamic Foundation, for example, to look at the production of books for children who are growing up around them. And then in the 1980s, we had the Bosnian crisis and the Rushdie affair. And those two events, more than anything else, helped to crystallize the Muslim identity. And you had, in parallel with that, you had those parents who were children in the 60s finding their own children now in the 80s and looking for schools, and you had the initiatives like the Islamic Primary coming up in 1984. And in the mid-90s onwards, I think if you compare, while we had, in the past, we had places of worship, now we have multi-functional mosques, which provide education, legal advice, and so on. It represents a broadness of vision. And not only that, our political work, which initially was perhaps single issue and focused outside the UK, now became through organizations like the UK Action Committee of Islamic Affairs, of which Iqbal was the joint convener when it was first started. They became broad-based, sophisticated lobbying for the first time in our history. Now, as a result of the need for unity, the plea for unity which arose from within the community, and the challenge to the time, the Muslim organizations created their first umbrella body called the Muslim Council of Britain. And recently, the MCB had its 9th annual general meeting, and the structures that were put in place have allowed a broad-based coalition with accountability and transparency to stand the test of time, alhamdulillah. But the MCB was very much a natural growth, reflecting the desires of the community. And it's been the basis through which the community has been able to press forward its demands and its needs for recognition, for due rights. And the membership of the MCB is such today that it's a heavyweight body, its voice is listened to. And again, without embarrassing my colleague Iqbal, he's been very much part of that transformation. Now, one of the major issues which the MCB took up was the one of recognition of the Muslim community. And the landmark event was the inclusion of a religion question in the 2001 census. This was fundamentally important for the Muslim community because before that, we were invisible. We were statistically invisible. The decisions that were made in terms of public sector service resource allocation or service delivery did not recognize that there was a group in society who had needs. And the census has given us for the first time information about our numbers. Before we didn't know how many Muslims there were. The estimates vary from 1 million to 4 million. Now we know, as today, there are probably 1.9 million. It gives information about the age profile, socio-economic data, health data. And what is important is that in the past, it was ethnicity which mattered in terms of public service allocation. So it was whether the categories were Asian or black. And as a result, the Muslim needs were missed out, particularly in areas of social services, in health and employment. Because as you know, for example, in the public sector, there is a responsibility of a local authority to employ staff reflecting its local population. And if that population was not reflected in terms of what they knew about the Muslims, then there would not be a truly diverse workforce. Now, the census itself, because it's presented us so much data, it's also identified our need for more data. And if you look at the pie chart there, you see the large number of Muslims in that other category, over 20%. Now, who are they?
Okay? Now those are Muslims of Turkish ancestry, Somali ancestry, Arab ancestry, North Africans. So there's need for far more research to be done. And the MCB is really very keen to promote research work, and we have research proposals for whom we are seeking funding. And there are other steps. There's a Muslim household survey going on at the moment, not by the MCB, but by another organization. Now, what is interesting about the census is that it gave us some very startling information about our youth population. For example, almost a third of Muslims were in that age group, 0 to 15. And you can imagine the implications that has for higher education, for employment. 52% in 2001 were under 24. And in London alone, 1/5 of the children in that particular age band were Muslim. Okay? So, and this is important, I think, to remember, because this is at a time when Britain, and not just Britain, but other countries in Europe, have an aging population. They have declining birth rates. So, in a sense, when someone like Sir Herman Moosley said, the success of Bradford depends on the success of Muslims, right? This is what he at the back of his mind. And so in that sense, the success of Muslims is tied in, the success of Britain is tied in with the success of Muslims. They're a real strategic asset to the country. And that has been recognized in terms of the contribution they can make to the workforce in years to come. Now, because youth are such an important component of our society, the MCB last year started some research work where we conducted focus groups and we interviewed young people to try and work out what makes them tick, what do they really think, what are their hopes. And if I could summarize this piece of work, there seemed to be two segments of young people. There were those who had made it. They had some professional qualifications, and those particular people had some vision. They did want to reach out to society. They were different from their parents. They wanted to work with non-Muslim groups. Their parents were really concerned with building up Muslim institutions. They wanted to reach out. And then there's the other group who were trapped, who lived in in a sort of cycle of dreams and missed opportunities. And if you ask me, where's the bulk today? Is it in the top box or the bottom box? I really can't say, right? But clearly what we do know is what we want to do. We want to move them from the bottom box up to the top box, right? But my gut feeling is, if you look at data on deprivation, which could be a proxy, is that, and this is very, really shocking, that 33% of the Muslim population live in the 10% most deprived neighborhoods of the country. So clearly, most of them will be, at the moment, in the bottom box. Okay, and so there's a lot of work to be done. But unfortunately, I think what we have seen is that the security regime of recent years has tended to isolate both groups. Individuals who were previously fairly benign have hardened their attitudes. And I think it's very surprising, when I speak to friends, how many of our households now know somebody who has been detained or has been arrested. My own son has been stopped and questioned. A colleague in the MCB, his son was detained for 7 hours. So there is a climate there which is not helping cohesion in society. And the matter gets worse when we have people like that, men like that, in that position, making statements like Muslims have a completely false sense of grievance against the West, right? So men like that making statements of that type is picked up by the tabloid press. And what do they say? Muslims should stop whining, okay? And what happens next? The man on the Clapham omnibus goes and punches somebody in the face, right? So we must be wary of the language that is being used and for political expediency and other reasons, the attitude of us and them, it's not helping anybody, and it's grossly unfair. And I think we should, though it's difficult to say this, but you know what happened in Germany in the 1930s? Let us look back. What was the language being used at the time which led to the tragedies subsequently? And even, I'm sad to say, someone who should know better, the chief rabbi, Jonathan Sachs, commenting on 7/7, he could use words like, there's a virus which has affected the country. That whole terminology positions a wholesome, clean, white body succumbing to an external, alien, damaging, evil force, okay? We have to break out of that rhetoric. Now, okay, the Muslim community is trying. I mean, what we are doing today is an example. There are positive moves. The MCB in particular has tried to engage with the media, and we had a major media seminar last year. We have engaged to try and show what is the added value of Muslims in Britain to the recent Finance and Trade Conference, where the Chancellor spoke, and he made positive remarks about the contribution of Muslims to society. But the event today, again, is another example of that type, of the positive steps which the community is taking. But there's a limit to what a small community can do. And I think it's for us to want to work out how the Muslim community can be helped. I've run out of my time. Thank you so much.
Jazakumullah khair, Dr. Jamil Sharif. Thank you. As the first speaker, I've chaired many sessions. As the first speaker, I've handed a note to and they stopped immediately. So we should give them another round of applause for that. I'd like to invite Sayyid Iqbal Sakrani now to cover the second area, more about the challenges. We've kind of established, though very quickly, a brief history of Muslims, Islam in Britain. Now, if we can look at some of the challenges and how do we take these challenges forward, that'd be useful.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم نحمد ونصلي على رسول الكريم. Friends, distinguished guests, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, and good afternoon to you all. Brother Jamil Sharif has made my life slightly much more easier because he has given such an excellent presentation in terms of the background of the Muslim community in the UK, in terms of its relationship with the nation, which is now our home. And it comes out so well in terms of our relationship with the institutions, with the organizations, the culture, the politics, all of it. And in terms of how Muslims can comfortably live in the country and remain British. But first of all, I think it is very appropriate to congratulate the Muslim Association of Britain, who are our national affiliates, for organizing this wonderful event, Islam Expo. It certainly makes all of us proud that such an institution is able to undertake such massive task of bringing together members of community, members of society to come together, interact and see for themselves how all of us can contribute for the betterment of the society. One just has to visit the various stalls and the rooms to see the diversity that really is there and how the diversity is working together to ensure that our needs are recognized, how we discharge the responsibilities that we have towards society as well. But let me now go on to the subject matter which I was given the task to go through, which is to identify the main challenges facing the Muslim community. What I've done is to categorize in basically 4 broad areas. And then perhaps look at the subsections of it a bit later. The first area, the main challenge that I see, is how to maintain a role for a faith community, Muslims, which are around 2 million, the largest faith community after Christianity, be it as a minority in the wider Western context. The second issue is how to effectively represent and meet the needs of the British Muslims. Thirdly, how to encourage progress and development within the Muslim community. And finally, how to improve relations between Muslims and the state and between Muslims and the fellow citizens, i.e. the non-Muslims. First, how do we maintain a minority Muslim community in a wider Western context? Timothy Garton Ash, a prominent columnist, recently wrote that Muslims in the West challenges from 2 quarters: American fundamentalist Christians and the European fundamentalist secularists. The former, in their blind support for Israel, believe that the reunification of all biblical lands of Israel will hasten the second coming, in which the rapture they will be forever saved. The European fundamentalist secularists think that all religion is blindness and stupidity, a kind of mental affliction of which Islam is particularly an acute problem. There is a lot of that analysis that I would agree with, but I will go a bit further. Those who view Islam's presence in the West as alien betray not only a misunderstanding of the present, but more importantly, the ignorance of their past. The West and Islam, and especially Europe and Islam, have shared an intellectual history. Investigative science, philosophy, medicine, agriculture, technology, as well as literary arts were all imports to Europe from the Islamic civilization. One only has to see the 1001 exhibition carried out by the Muslim Heritage Council in Manchester to really identify the range of discoveries and inventions that have been brought into Europe. So was the university, first developed in Muslim lands and adopted wholesale, including the curriculum and coursework across Europe from the 12th century. The Ottoman Caliphate method of consultation did not escape attention either. Attracted by the English royalist Alexandra Ross, published around 1650, noted that if Christians will but diligently read and observe the laws and histories of all the Mohammedans, which were known as meaning Muslims, they will blush to see how even the great Turk himself, a reference to the Ottoman Caliphate, will attempt nothing without consulting his mufti. Ross's reference to the great Turk and his mufti is, of course, a veiled attack at the authoritarian tendencies of the Cromwellians and their reluctance to separate the executive from the judiciary. Secondly, how to effectively represent British Muslims and their views. Here we find both a conceptual as well as a practical challenge. As identified earlier by Dr. Jamil Sharif, over the years, many organizations have come and many have gone, trying to represent the views of the community. as perhaps most of you already know, there is no priesthood in Islam. We have no equivalent of the Pope or the Archbishop of Canterbury or the Chief Rabbi. Islamic law does not entrust religious authority to any central figure. On important issues of Islamic jurisprudence, it is necessary to obtain what is called ijma, or consensus of the scholars. Note the reference to the plural scholars, which is deliberate. This has its drawbacks. They cannot be censored when extremists and the fringe elements set out to distort Islamic teachings, Islamic beliefs, as we have seen lately. They cannot be censored by the head of a profession because there isn't one. But this pluralism has advantages as well. There can be no misuse of religious power by a single cleric. There is room for different opinions, for debate and collaboration amongst scholars. The concept of Grand Mufti, which perhaps has come to light, which means the supreme religious leaders, is not one that is germane to Islam and is often the product of interference by the state to regulate religion. Learning, knowledge of Islamic scholarship is the only distinction Muslims recognize, and learning is open to all. And in fact, the greater emphasis to education is there, the respect for scholars. We are, all after all, God's stewards on earth, not just the special few. So it is up to the Muslim community itself to find its leaders and representatives. There have been a number of attempts early on, as identified, to create a national body to represent the interest of the Muslim community. The Muslim Council of Britain, established in 1997, was the culmination of years of consultation. In fact, it was more than 3 years that a very varied consultation took place across the country. An opportunity given to organizations and institutions and mosques to respond to the questionnaire that was sent out, whether there's a need for us to get together on a platform. The MCB is a national umbrella organization that serves and represents British Muslims. It does not claim to represent all the British Muslims. Neither does it claim to say it's the only body that represents the Muslim community. There are a number of others who do work in the community and who also represent the community. However, the MCB is distinctive for two main reasons. Firstly, with over 400 organizations affiliated, it is the largest representative organization. Secondly, the MCB is democratically constituted. Time and again, we hear of self-appointed leaders in the community being questioned. Who are they? Where do they come from? Who do they represent? This has been the tendency over the years. And to us, to many of us in the community who have been working together, this is the most important contribution to Britain by British Muslims. Able to bring together an organization based on the democratic principles. Organization set up by the community, for the community, accountable to the community. Importantly, funded by the community as well. As a result, with all these important factors, MCB is arguably Britain's most prominent British Muslim organization, recognized by the media, by the government, and I believe by the community as well. Lacking a religious hierarchy, the Muslim community has to devise pragmatic arrangements to manage its affairs based on cooperation, consultation, and coordination. Recently, the Prince's Trust, which is a charity set up by His Royal Highness Prince Charles, sought to extend a halal, Islamically permissible version of its loans to disadvantaged young people. This is an example of how we've been able to go into the mainstream. Not just issues of deprivation, unemployment, which are important and has been highlighted earlier, something that concerns us most, but where there is a contribution to the society, where they will be able to play their role in the mainstream. How do we get this movement moving forward? The Muslim Council of Britain's Business and Economics Committee helped to facilitate this particular scheme. And we have also recently, as mentioned earlier, organized an important conference on trade and finance, which was inaugurated by the Chancellor, Gordon Brown, only 2 to 3 weeks back. Giving the opportunity to the community at large, the usage of Islamic Sharia compliant products as far as investments are concerned, opportunity for us to get Islamic halal mortgages, all regulated by the Financial Services Authority, approved and legislated, and therefore it becomes a mainstream product. Representing the community is always a challenge. The Muslim community in Britain is in many ways a microcosm of the British society itself. Multicultural, multi-ethnic, with diverse experiences and needs, and of course, importantly, greater expectations. Around 2/3 of the 2 million Muslims originate from the Indian subcontinent. The rest comprise people from Africa, Arab, Turkish, and the Eastern European background. To this list, we must of course add increasing number of converts, both black and white Britons. British Muslims range from relatively affluent Indians to some among the Pakistanis and the Bangladeshis who live in considerable poverty. From the recently arrived Albanians to those whose ancestry is English, Scots, Welsh, or Irish. They find themselves on these shores through different circumstances and experiences. They all face the additional particular challenges of being young or old, men and women, black and brown. The MCB strives to ensure that all these diverse groups who share a common bond of faith are represented. We are not fully there yet, but we are well on the way to bring such diverse section, not just from ethnicity and the cultural background, but from the religious factions as well. Different school of thoughts, a body that brings in the key Sunni and the Shia bodies together, a body that brings in the scholars across the community from different factions on board. Not an easy task, a major task that we have. Now, how to encourage progress and development within the Muslim community is a third challenge. The diversity of the Muslim community is itself a strength. There are also many achievements to draw upon. And Jamil identified one key achievement, the question on the census in 2001, where for the first time we can proudly call ourselves British Muslims. Until then, what do we know? Going back, black and white. Then the word brown came in. Then the word Asian came in. Then the ethnicity came in. National origins, Pakistanis, Indian, Arabs, whatever. Finally, the identity which we feel comfortable with is calling ourselves proudly as British Muslims. Not an easy task. Years of campaign, going back for more than 10 years. But then when you bring together such bodies together within the community and engage yourself with the other faith communities, we've got their support on board. The Christians, Jews, Hindus and Sikhs. Many of them are very reluctant to pursue with this identity or faith identity. But finally we were able to convince them that it's in the interest of the community at large to be identified on faith grounds, more importantly because of service areas where until now we have been deprived. There's a range of issues on the media front. How we've been able to engage with the media. When there's a clear denigration, vilification of the Muslim community, it's the council that takes it up with the editors. You've heard about Kilroy, his program, how he would deliberately try to denigrate us, one of the most senior journalists within the BBC. But when issues of fairness and justice is presented in a very diligent and responsible manner, then the action is expected as well, and the chap had to leave out. Many examples of how editorials apologized, first time ever, and when the newspapers apologized under the editorial. They said they're sorry for calling Muslims terrorists, when in actual fact there was no such case of any violent behavior or so. Now we're able to have more articles being published in the papers or so. There have been books, the pocket guide with the Muslim Council of Britain had published, distributed in the mosques across the country to the community, identifying the responsibilities we have in the society, outlining our duties as well, going hand in hand. In fact, there are so many areas of positive work and achievement that have taken place that one can visit our website, and there's a visit of the MCB stall and you will see the brochure, the MCB pictorial brochure, which outlines the achievements and campaigns that have taken place, which will give a better idea of the work that is taking place. I've got last few minutes, and what I'll try and do is basically come to the clear conclusion that while we rightly celebrate our achievements, we must also diligently tackle the shortcomings by addressing areas which fall short of the ideals required by our faith. For instance, we must do more to ensure our young people are given an effective voice. We must ensure that women are not denied their due rights because of cultural practices contrary to religious teachings. We must publicly oppose extremists or the fringe elements who deliberately distort the message of Islam, as we have seen today. A year back, how much of publicity that was given out in the media for this few useful idiots to come up on the media and say it has something to do with Islam, something to do with teaching of Islam in terms of taking lives, killing people, destroying the infrastructure. No, cannot be any further from the truth. But this is the message that has been coming out. We must do more to ensure our imams, who play a very important role in the mosques, to provide that leadership in getting the true message of Islam out. We must promote tolerance, understanding, dialogue and cooperation with the society at large. This requires leadership at the national and the local level, coupled with the active participation of the Muslim community, young and old, and women as well. And the final challenge is improving relations between Muslims and the state, British Muslims and their fellow citizens, the non-Muslim Britons. This is and can only be a two-way process. Muslims must be active participants in the mainstream of society. This is happening, but more needs to be done. The MCB's motto is seeking to common good. We are an organization concerned with the welfare of British Muslims, but we believe that this must be sought by serving and sharing the common good of our society as a whole. We are concerned for the welfare of all Britons, whatever their faith or no faith. We seek constructive engagement within the wider society and playing an active part as responsible and the concerned citizens. Moreover, we view this as a religious and a social duty. Finally,
the sun is out, families are here, it's time to come down to the family fun zone. Fun for all the kids, bouncy castles, sumo wrestlers. Please look out for the sumo wrestlers to buy your tickets for the family fun zone. At the same time, one of the most important aspects of Islam Expo is teaching the importance of the contributions made by Muslims. At 4 o'clock in Seminar Room 1, there is a lecture on Muslim contributions to medicine and physics. So please make your way to Seminar Room 1, 4 o'clock, for Muslim contributions to medicine and physics.
I think this is a message for me to say, that's it, and pass it back to the chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Sir Iqbal Sakrani. That brings us into our talking from the stage. If there is any questions that people would like to ask, if any, already there's hands gone up. So we've got about 10-15 minutes, so inshallah we'll use that time up. The sister in the white hijab there. If you keep your hands up so I can kind of mentally note where the next people are.
Yes, this is addressed to both panelists. How far do you think the Muslim communities need to help themselves in order to be socially and economically secure in Britain? For instance, a small minority of the Pakistani Muslim community who marry their daughters too young, sometimes against their will, thus depriving them of pursuing their education and thwarting their future careers. Thank you.
Iqbal, can I ask you, there's a mic on the table. Jamil, who wants to go first? Okay.
I think we do, of course, have a responsibility. There are issues where our primary responsibility is on the Muslim community. There are other issues that need to be worked along with our government. In terms of the socio-economic indicators, in terms of failures in education, it has to be worked in partnership. It's a fact that the Pakistani and the Bangladeshi community are at the lower of the education league. There's no doubt about it. But we have to identify areas where the problem arises. Where is the problem? And of course, they have the expertise, the government, the education department has the expertise. They are citizens of the country. And therefore the responsibility lies in addressing those concerns. But I think it has to be a joint effort in trying to deal with this very serious problem.
Okay, the gentleman in the second row in the red and white top.
Hello, I'm a Turkish Cypriot Muslim who was born in London. And I'd like to ask you if whose responsibility is it to include people like myself who have never been inside a mosque in Islamic discussion and not to be pushed aside with quotes from scriptures? Whose responsibility is it to include people like myself who feel in great danger in this time? Because I have a Muslim name, yet I do not have any say in what happens in Muslim affairs.
I think it's quite an important question. For one to be involved in the community work, or one to be heard, there has to be initiatives that have to be taken from your side, as well as the community. At the moment, how does one go about it? There are community institutions, mosques, which we feel need to be more welcoming. Community organizations are there. The Muslim Council of Britain, we try to provide the information to the community at large, an institution that is open to all Muslims to come in, irrespective of your ethnic background, where you are, where your origins come from, or your particular thought on any particular issue. It's a body that will bring you together. It's an inclusive body. So I think the impetus basically lies with that individual. But at the same time, there shouldn't be any blockages, any area that would prevent you to come in and join in and work for the common good. You see, it is vital that there must be much more friendly atmospheres appearing, which enables us to attract our people to join in. Yes, there are areas we know that brings in difficulties for young people to come in, our mosque structures, our institutions. But I think more and more organizations now, even in student unions, you've got some organizations that are there. It will be difficult for anybody, any organization, to identify 1.6 million Muslims on the ground in the households and go and see them individually on a one-to-one basis and bring them in. Yes, we have a duty to get the message across through our media, the Muslim News, the Muslim Weekly, Islam Channel, Impact International, which enables us to convey the information of what's happening in the community. But it's crucial for us to play that role by remaining on the sidelines, by remaining on the fringes, and hoping that things will just have work out well. It's not good for yourself, neither is it good for the society.
I think it's very interesting that you raise this issue, that someone like you feel in danger. I think it's a terrible indictment of the times, and I hope you don't change your name. But I think the mosque, maybe the mosque is not the only avenue open. I think what is important is for people who now recognize their cultural identity as opposed to their religious identity, to get involved in neighborhood politics, in civil society, in alliances, in trade unions, and participate as a member and build relationships, build friendships, and where there are issues of principle, you draw on your heritage to make your stand.
Okay, we are running out of time, and there's a few more hands still up. What I'm going to do, because I've taken two male voices, I'm going to take two female voices now. So the lady in the black over there, and then the lady with the sari over there. And if you can both address your questions now, and hopefully the speakers will answer them straight away.
Hello. What do you think are the religious issues in the workplace? Do you think companies should be recognising religion as an issue?
And if you can pass the mic to the lady in front of you.
The foremost issue in my mind now is what do we do to help our boys who are in detention? I don't mean the guilty ones, I mean the ones that are innocent. Do we sacrifice them to the Blair and Bush laws, or do we do something to get them out? Remember, we live in a democratic society and we do enjoy freedom of speech.
Okay, thank you. Iqbal and Jamil, can I ask you to respond to that?
Yeah, the first question was on the responsibilities of employers at the workplace. Now, there is legislation in place since at least 2 years to stop harassment or victimization on the grounds of faith or no faith. And there is an onus on employers and this has been through guidelines published by the CBI and other employer bodies, that if you look after the cultural needs of your workforce, you have a happier workforce, and hence you have better productivity. The MCB has produced 2 publications and guidelines for employers, and if you give me your details, we can pass that on to you later.
And the second question?
Yes. Now, there is a very dangerous trend that is being followed at the moment in the country, and that is that we remain silent to the issues of injustices, oppression taking place outside the UK. There is a big talk about right to express, the freedom of expression, yes, but somehow we see that freedom of expression seems to be acceptable in areas that suits certain groups and certain areas of agendas. But in terms of when we highlight the areas of real oppression, the way we see great forms of cruelty, acts of barbarism taking place in Palestine or Chechnya or in Kashmir, certainly we are told to remain calm and quiet. Now I think the concept of ummah is there. We cannot really run away from that responsibility of sharing the concerns and care of the state of the ummah. So there is no question of us remaining silent when these issues of injustice are taking place. But what we need to do now, with the new laws that have come in, which are in many ways curtailed that open expression that we were able to come out with, to ensure that when we highlight the issues of oppression, of injustices, that somehow we do not glorify acts of terror. It's a very fine line that has come in. And in fact, the MCB has taken this issue in a very serious manner with the parliamentarians in the House of Lords, that how do you distinguish supporting genuine causes, for fighting for freedom, lanes which have been taken away from the Muslims also, and for you to speak against injustices. So that's a tremendous, difficult task we have. But it doesn't mean that we get away from that. We need to be alert, aware, and I'm sure as time and again the government has made it clear that that doesn't curtail your right to speak against injustices, but it has to be done in an orderly manner that hopefully doesn't infringe the laws that are there.